What's up, everyone? Amanda here. It is officially spooky season, and if you're like me, you love a cute, fun, maybe a little bit snarky line of merchandise to go with whatever season it is. We have got you covered. Melissa and I have dropped our Halloween collection in the Shop Asha online store, and it is amazing. You have to head on over there. We got shirts, we got hoodies, we got tumblers, we got all the things. So shopashaonline.com, and everything has free shipping in our Halloween collection. And if you order by October 12th, you are guaranteed to look super fly for trick or treat.
Welcome to the table. The table. I love it. The table. The table. Okay, so here we are, season 4. We're like knee deep in season 4.
Yes.
We have, at this point, to where we're recording, released 4 episodes have gone live. We have 2 more up to bat, and we have a list in the dugout of people that we're going to be recording interviews with. So, welcome. You're listening to Tablecast. Come to the table with Melissa and Amanda. And I'm so glad you're here. So pull up a chair. If you're new, there's a seat for you. There's always a seat for you. If you've been with us for a while and you've got a chair that you've etched your name in it, you're going to be sitting here forever. We are so glad you've stayed. And then you have come along for this incredibly insane journey.
Yes. If you're new here, you're like, what the heck is going on with these women? So Cliff Notes version, we accidentally started a podcast.
Yep. Yep, truly.
Fumbled and fell all over ourselves in the process of accidentally starting that podcast.
True.
Deconstructed and rebuilt our faith.
Yep.
And now
we're on a crazy journey of season 4.
Yes, here we are. And
all caught up.
and we've decided that we've been talking for so many episodes that we wanted to invite other women to the table. So that's where we are for season 4. But this episode is a very special bonus episode. We just kind of wanted to do like a little, just kind of like what we got out of our conversations with the women we've interviewed so far. And also kind of talk a little bit. We did a thing. We went to a podcasting conference. And it was so...
If you've been with us, honestly, and you know, you're like, uh-oh, they did a thing. We did a thing.
We did a thing, I know. But it was so amazing, and it was so good. And we want to share that with you guys. Yeah. And we want to share just the people that we met and kind of what we got out of that conference.
Yeah. So, if you've been here for a little bit, you may have noticed that our format changed a little bit, and we changed our branding a little bit, but nothing too scary and nothing too out of the box. We really felt like the direction we were going just flowed with where we were at. And it's like I said, we accidentally started a podcast. You know, you've been along for this journey as we go. And as this podcast has progressed, this is the way that we've really felt led to go, and I'm happy with it.
Oh yeah,
I'm excited, and it's been a great adventure. So now that we're like 4 episodes into season 4, and we've had some great conversations, what's your overall like? I think this has been good, or I felt like this wasn't necessarily the best. We could have done better, things like that. What do you think?
I've enjoyed like talking to the different ladies and kind of just getting a different perspective on things. Like I always we've talked to Julie Zine-Coleman before. So like, I love her.
Yeah.
Like I love everything about her. She's contributed to Asha magazine. So like we've got to know her fairly well over this last year. And she's such a cool lady.
I think at the end of the day, anytime I talk to her, because she's just so rooted in the word, and she just has such an amazing understanding of scripture and the role of women,
mm-hmm.
and how those two become married together, that I feel more loved and more empowered as a daughter of God. Like when just having a conversation with her, I'm like,
Yeah.
it blesses me so much. I'm like, I need to have like the weekly sit down and be like, I'm having a bad day, call Julie. I need to feel empowered right now. I need some clear identity speaking into my life. I need to call Julie.
And I feel like every single woman we've talked to so far has been like that. Like you had a previous, connection with Sarah.
Yeah.
This was really the first time I had ever had a conversation with her, was when we recorded it. But I mean, just her insight into stuff was really amazing. And Ruth Hovsepian, and just like her viewpoint on prayer, and her book, just so good. And then Kristen Reek, and that chick is just like,
she's awesome. And I mentioned there that I met her like just over Zoom in a group. And so my interaction with her before we recorded was limited to a couple meetings. And if you've ever been in a Zoom meeting, like you're listening to the speaker and then people contribute. So maybe you get a couple minutes of somebody talking. But yeah, she just impressed me so much in those groups that I was like, I want to get to know this lady better. So I enjoy being able to sit down with her.
The vibe I get from her is like, if we lived really close, like we could be best friends.
Yes, totally. Yeah, totally. You're like, we'd be hanging out.
Yes.
Yeah, definitely.
But no, like just kind of the insight and everything from the ladies. I definitely feel like we've hit our stride. Like the first couple, like I felt like I felt like I was awkward.
Yeah.
Like it was not the ladies we interviewed at all. It was not what they had to say. It was
different than you and I sitting down and having a conversation. And then you actually have to think about like, oh, okay. Like I'm, you almost like, I have to put on a journalistic hat in a sense and be like, okay, I'm going to be asking this person questions. And for me, I felt like we found like talking to like Julie Zine Coleman or even like Sarah, because like I felt comfortable talking to her. Like I could sit down and have a conversation with her all day long. Julie Zine Coleman, same thing.
Yeah.
But then when you get into areas of like, women that we are not as familiar with, and now you're like, oh, like I have to actually like lead the conversation. Yeah. I can't just necessarily wing it as much.
Well, like even like editing them, I'm like listening back to our conversation. I was like, I am so weird. Like, gosh, I'm awkward.
The joy of what's never what joy podcasting, listening to yourself and going, I'm weird.
But like
Amanda Turnbull 2023.
That's why I so appreciate you as my co-host, because
I'm weirder.
No, you carried us. Like there were times where I'm like, I am an awkward weirdo person, and Melissa is just like, I'm going to be amazing and carry the whole episode.
Hold on a second. If I was the one editing, I'd be like, I am so awkward and Amanda carried us. Like, that's what I would say. So the truth is, it's like, if I edited, that's what I listen to myself. And I'm like, who am I? Who do I think I am? I'm so weird. Yeah, no. Actually, okay, that's a lie. Because I listen to myself and I'm like, I'm so awesome.
Gosh, I'm cool.
I'm so cool.
I could be best friends with this lady.
Yeah. Okay. I tried. I'm sorry. Yeah, busted. And it's not because I think I am. I'm just delusional. I live in an imaginary world. Like, I really do. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Where I'm like, it's okay. It's okay.
So I do feel better about my interviewing. Like, I feel more confident in that. I feel like I was awkward in the beginning. But what about you? What was, like...
I think that's really it. Like, I think, like, if I were to do... We've always done anything that we've worked in, or... we run in similar circles, and those type of things do the same thing. So if I'm doing theater, or you were doing something event or something this or ministry or whatever, you sit down after you do something and you have what went well, what didn't go well, what are we going to do again? What will we never do again?
Yeah.
And so we kind of come from that background. So for me, yes, definitely opening up the table, having other people join us, and getting to like dive into other people's stories and other perspectives. But also, like, it's been challenging because when you make a declaration, like, of who you are, or who you want to be, or who you think you are,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, okay, I want to be this open-minded person. I want to be able to talk to people and respect where they're coming from, their perspective, their values, respect them, and then have an open conversation. When that really happens, and you're like, okay, am I doing that justice? Am I only talking to people who are feeding the same thing I'm saying? Because that's going to be a problem for me. And being aware of myself in that space and being like, okay, do we have an eclectic collection of people from different walks of life with places where they differ? We promote ourselves in the Christian circles. So to me, my criteria for that is Jesus. And so that's good. The rest of it, let's have a conversation about. I want to be that person. So I hope that we do justice to that. So I think that that's the place where I'm like, okay, we're doing this. And now I can look at it and be like, okay, I want to make sure that I hold to these things.
Yeah.
And then also the interviewing skills of being like, okay, how much do I need to prepare? You know, because we talk about like the format and how we want to run this, and like, are we going to have a set questions that we ask every single person every single time? Just make it easy. Do we just want to have it? But then we run a podcast that is conversationalist.
Yeah.
And so that lends itself to a whole nother, like, I don't go to an event and sit down and script all my questions.
Yeah.
But then you can't be that loosey-goosey either, because then I'm like, yeah, I should probably prepare. Or write down the things, because we've interviewed a few authors. And so for me, just while I'm reading their book or while I'm listening to their podcast or, I mean, you know, whatever, writing down the questions as I have them so that I'm prepared. And just the real life application. Like, you think all these things, you can plan, but when you actually sit down and do it, going, oh, this is what I really needed. I spent all this time preparing this, and what I really needed was this tool here.
Yeah.
And so that has been, like, I feel like, no joke, we accidentally started a podcast. I didn't even know what one was. I had to ask you, do you know what a podcast is? And you're like, yes. To go from that to now interviewing guests, being in the 4th season, we talked about, we went to like the biggest podcast conference, you know, ever created. And to see how big podcasting is.
Yeah.
And that we're doing it, and to be like, okay, so this is what I need to do. It's been a challenge, but it's been fun. It's been amazing. Like, I'm so excited to grow into this.
Yeah.
You know, like, and yeah, that's what it is for me. That's where I'm at in season 4, that I'm just like, okay, so even if I've made mistakes, and even if I was awkward, and even if I sounded dumb, or even if I didn't have the perfect question, you know, because I'm not a journalist. I didn't go to school for that.
But I did. That's a really sad thing.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I was trying to call you out.
No, I just like...
I forgot about that. but you did that like before podcasting. So whatever. It's all good.
It was, yes, print journalism. It was different.
Which you rock at, by the way. So, but yeah. That's for me where we're at with season 4. Like, how I feel, where we're at, where it's gone, where we've been, where we're going, all of it. It is summed up in, we've been stumbling along, and we're learning, and we're growing, and I think we get better every day.
Every episode. Every episode. Absolutely. I feel the same way. So you mentioned podcast movement.
Podcast movement. I'm even wearing my podcast movement shirt today. Well, one of them.
I know. We might have spent a little bit of money on some merch.
Just a little.
But no, it was so good. So podcast movement is just a podcasting conference for all genres of podcasting. So this was the first time we had ever gone to a conference that was not Christian focused. And holy cow, the amount, like, just the pure amount of information that was given.
Right. And the level.
Yes.
The level. Like, I mean, when I walked in and I realized that Paramount, and I say Paramount like the TV
Yes.
movie, Paramount is in the podcast business. Like,
Yes.
they are, like...
And they're there.
This next level.
And, like, Disney podcast. Like...
Yeah, next level. It's all next level. It's next level.
Yes. Disney podcast booth was set up. It was super cute. It looked like a little house. And you went in, and, like, part of it was set up so it was, like, Anna and Elsa's living room. So I had to take a picture and send it to my niece and be like, look where Auntie Amanda is. And she thought it was super cool and amazing. But just the level of people that we got to learn from was so good. Like, there was a lot of stuff that I was like, okay, we are on the right path. We are doing the right thing. And then there was
the difference between, like, this for me was like, going in and seeing that there is independent podcasting, and there's network podcasting.
Yes. Yeah.
And these two worlds are like colliding and about to like explode. And it's just an amazing world to be in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what was your favorite part of Podcast Movement?
Okay, this is... So I fangirled. And this is my favorite
I forgot about this.
Yeah, this is my favorite part. And I posted it, on my social media, but I grew up like at the right age for WWE wrestling, right?
Yeah.
It was WWF, but they can't do that anymore because of the animals.
Yeah.
So in the 90s, like, wrestling was big.
Oh, yeah.
Even I told my boys this story when I got home, and they're like, oh my gosh, yes, I forgot. Because they watched wrestling up until they were like 10 years old. I mean, like, it was a big thing. Their dad was so into wrestling. My grandma, like, I remember when I took my first husband to my grandparents' house, and she was like, it's time to sit down and watch some wrestling, because they're from the Midwest. So that's how you say it, wrestling. And she's like, we got to watch and so her and my grandpa would sit down once a week and watch wrestling. And oh my goodness, my first husband thought that was like, he's like, your grandparents watch wrestling. Like, we had wrestling figures. Like, this is the 90s, and this is like the time when Hulk Hogan switched over with Randy Savage, and they started wearing black, and they were like the NWO, right? And they were bad guys. And my grandma, I will never forget, she was like, I just don't understand that Hulk Hogan boy. He was such a good boy, but now he wants to hang out with, like, be a bad kid, and I just don't understand. He was such a good boy, My grandma didn't talk like that, but in my head she did. So, like, we watched it. So, okay, back to the podcast. So, I sit down in a marketing session. Like, you go to all these different sessions and you could learn whatever you wanted to about podcasting from people who are podcasting. I sit down and these three guys get up on stage, and I'm like, I know those guys from somewhere. They're in a part of my brain where I'm like, know you, but I'm like, I've never talked to you. Where would I know you from? And I'm like, were they at one of the other like Christian podcast things? Did I see them somewhere? Like, did I watch something? Like, yeah, this is a place in my brain where I'm like, and then the guy gets up and he starts talking, and I'm like, what does he think this is? A wrestling match? Because he's all like he's doing like the wrestling talk. Yeah. Like, Sunday, on podcast, right? And he's going, and I'm like, what is going on? Well, it turns out that wrestling actually consumes the number one space in podcasting genres. Who knew that wrestlers podcast? So I've got an old commissioner, I've got Ric Flair's son-in-law. I remember when this guy came on the wrestling scene, because Ric Flair was so big in wrestling. So you got Conrad Thompson, you've got Chris Bischoff, you've got Jeff Jarrett, right? Okay. Yeah. WWE superstars sitting on the stage giving me marketing advice about my podcast. And I was like, it opened a weird place in my brain, so I totally fangirled. You didn't go to that session with me. We split up because there was another session we were both interested in. Yeah. And so just by random happenstance, you went to go to wrestlers. You went to go to that one. I never fangirl. I'm not a fan of anything. Like, I just cannot. I cannot get on board with, like, I just can't.
Like the screaming, jumping.
Yeah,
up and
I've
down.
never like I even with bands, like I love music, but I love songs. I don't even like fan over bands. Like I don't get starstruck. I just can't sell out to something. It's just not in my nature. And I fangirl, took a picture and was like, oh my gosh, I used to watch you on I said like the stupidest stuff. So anyway, that would be my favorite moment of all time. Surprised myself. Okay, what was yours? That was a long story, sorry.
No. So I fangirled a little bit too.
Oh yeah, you did!
Because we were eating lunch in this restaurant, and like 2 tables over, I'm like, I follow that. I think that guy is on TikTok.
But like, and understand, like I'm at the table talking and Amanda keeps looking off to the side. And I'm like, what?
Yeah. I'm like,
that guy's on TikTok.
That's Dan McClellan from TikTok. And you're like, I have no idea who that is. And I'm like, yeah, look, he looks just like Dan McClellan. So like I pulled it up on my phone and I'm like showing Melissa and I'm like, look, this is the guy. And you're like, yeah, he kind of looks like him. And then the guy he was with, whose back was to us, like he kind of turned around and I was like, that's his co-host of his podcast. This is him. And so,
so you totally like event stalked him.
Oh yeah,
to make sure.
Like I went on like the event app and I was like, I typed in his name and like I was like to see like if he was at the conference, and then he made a TikTok at the conference and I was like, it's him, he's here. And you're like, go over and say hi. And I was like, that's weird. I don't want to like interrupt their lunch.
No, and this is after I was like, I went and talked to wrestlers. You can go talk to the TikTok guy.
But so they finished eating before we did. And so as they got up to leave, they walked past our table and I was like, I'm so sorry, but I have to tell you, I follow you on TikTok. And I don't even know what I said. I said something stupid, but like basically like, good. You're awesome and I love you.
And then his co-host was like, did you know he had a podcast? And he went, yeah, like I know he has a podcast. Yes. Like they did. They sat and talked to us and for a second and it was nice.
It's so cool. But I don't know. I think like quite honestly, like my overall favorite moment was just the little bits of time. We've been members of the Christian Podcast Association since we accidentally started a podcast. Like once we decided like this was really going to be a thing for us, we joined the Christian Podcast Association. And so there's been a lot of people that we've known online for years.
Yeah.
That we finally got to meet in person. But just to be able to have little bits of time like talking to those people. Yes. Like we went to a session. We went to it wasn't like a panel. It was like a guy interviewing a neuroscientist, and you were super stoked about this one. And I was like, I'm interested, like not quite the level you were, but still like it was really super interesting to me. I did not
fangirl over neuroscience as much as I did over the wrestlers, to put it into perspective.
But we went, and one of the guys from the Christian Podcast Association was just a few rows ahead of us. And so after everything was done, you had approached him because you wanted to talk to him about like what his thoughts were and everything. And we ended up sitting there. Oh my gosh. I don't even know. Like,
it was like an hour.
They came and they changed like the stage setting for like the next big person. Cause like it was kind of in like a little room. So it was like meant to be like more like the keynote speakers. Mm-hmm. And so then like you would leave the room and you would go out to like breakout sessions of like smaller speaker sessions. And so this was like where the big main stage was. And so they had even like reset the main stage for the whole next thing that was coming up. And, but like that was just so good just to be able to sit. And we went and had dinner with the Christian Podcast Association the first night. And so, being able to sit and just share a meal and get to know people and share about our podcasts and them share about theirs. We just met so many amazing, cool people.
We did. And something that I really appreciated about that is the way God has designed his family and his community, that you can take people from all over and bring them together with a common bond. And, you know, you get good conversations, you get good, things. Yeah. But when you bring people together that God has brought together, it's like next level.
Yeah.
I said that about the whole podcast. It's next level, but to see how God works in that, and how you can be in a room with complete strangers and yet feel like you're in a room with family.
Oh yeah.
And that was the amazing part. And yeah, to sit there for like, to start talking. Like I went up and I said, what do you think? Because this guy is a missionary from Japan, and we had a lot of great conversations with him up till that point, because I was very fascinated in the religion of Japan and the fact that Japan is like an agnostic and an atheist country, and how do you look at discipleship through that lens versus how we look at discipleship, in churches in America. Two totally different conversations.
Oh, yeah.
Because to have a conversation with an agnostic about Jesus, well, they have to first believe that there's something outside of themselves.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of groundwork that you have to lay to even get to a conversation about Jesus. So like just fascinating. Like it was just fascinating. But then to be listening to this neuroscience, which there were a few things that I was like, holy cow, like some of this is hard to listen to, because to come from a faith background and to come from like knowing truth of Jesus and be like, part of it saddens you because you're like, why are you so blind to, like, there was one statement, and here's how I'll put this, and it's not a judgmental thing. This is just flat out, we don't know. This is the guy's statement. We don't know the answer to this.
Yeah.
But we do.
Yeah.
The answer is Jesus.
Yeah.
The answer is God. The answer is the Holy Spirit. The answer is, like, there is an answer.
Yeah.
But you're refusing to see it in your science. And that's, you know what, that's okay. Like, it's okay. I can, like, but part of me wants to well up and stand up from the back of the room and like interrupt this entire conference. It's like, but we have the answer. Like, now I want to go sit down with you and dissect this. But so I was really fascinated to see what he thought of the neuroscience, which led into like a whole nother conversation.
Oh, yeah.
Like I said, like an hour. So that was awesome. But just to be like, that has been probably on this journey. As I was talking about all the different guests, I want to talk to people with different walks of life, with different viewpoints, different perspectives, different experiences. I don't want to be so sheltered in a box. And I've said that for a long time, but yet the choices I've made have led me to be sheltered in a box.
Yeah.
So I can say it, but I wasn't living it out. So now I want to live it out. I want to make sure that I'm actually holding myself to the standard of, am I willing to listen to other people's perspectives and opinions and respect their space to give those, even if I don't agree.
Yeah.
And so that was really good. And honestly, to see how the independent podcaster has grown the podcast industry. It's not a mainstream network. In fact, the networks are looking to independent podcasters to see what they're doing, because podcast has been around.
Yeah.
And I've only been aware of it for the last few years, but other people my age and older who are like becoming aware of it, and to see this younger generation, but then to see people in the younger generation, because we went to a session with some influencers who were young, and they're really big on Instagram, and they're really big in their influencer world.
Yeah.
And the only reason that they have a podcast is because a network approached them and said, hey, you're
already big enough.
You're big, and what you've got going on is going to make a great podcast.
Yeah.
Let's do a podcast. And they're like, yes. And now they're finding themselves they're accidentally starting podcasts.
Yeah.
And this is the generation that's grabbing a hold of this.
Yeah.
And podcasting is the next big broadcast media platform. And so, but to see how the networks are coming into it and how the independent podcaster has grown it, how now those two are melding together that was probably, because when we talked about when we went to our first podcasting conference, how it expanded our minds, and we were like, oh my goodness, podcasting is a thing. We can do this. That's when we decided to be an official, legitimate, oh my goodness, this is what we're going to do.
Yes.
We are going to put effort into this, and we're going to go. Now seeing it from such a
like almost
The
like
big
the
picture.
30,000 foot view.
The 30,000 foot view. Now I'm like, oh my goodness. Like this is, it's not just a thing, it's a thing. So
yeah,
that was awesome. And then, but here's something. Okay. So we've talked about, we've hit on every single point of the direction that we're going now. So to go to that and say, we talked to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
We shared our story with a lot of people. We shared what we do as podcasters. They shared what they do. And we noticed something over the week. I mean, this is a week. We were there for a week. And we started to notice a theme. Mm-hmm. And we started to notice that people gravitated to us and our story and asked us questions, and they wanted to dive in. And yes, the conference itself was great, and I've got a notebook full of information that I got as a podcaster. Yes. But the number one thing that you and I on day 3? Day 4?
Yeah.
Day 3. I think it was day 3. We got to the afternoon end of day 3, and we were sitting in big comfy chairs in front of a fireplace at the Gaylord Hotel in Denver.
Well, no, back up, because on the morning of day 3,
okay,
we wake up in the hotel room, and you make the comment, we need to start a second podcast. And I see how your face tenses up every time I say that.
Okay, hold on. You got to go back even further, because I have been saying, okay, well, let's go back. Hold on. Planning season 4.
Yes.
You said, as we were planning season 4, that Come to the Tablecast, as we are rebranding it, is the official podcast of Asha Media.
Yes.
And I said, whoa, wait a second. It is not the official podcast of Asha Media. Yeah. However, is that what we want it to be? Because if that's the direction we're going to go with it, that's a whole different conversation. And you and I had a long conversation about that. And we decided at that moment that Tablecast was not the official podcast of Asha Media. And from that, and I said, well, we'll have to start another podcast for Asha Media. Asha Media needs a podcast, right? So there has been multiple times before that morning in the hotel room that I have said we need to start a second podcast. And every single time your face muscles and like they change, like the stress and the response that I get from all of your nonverbal cues is like, heck no, move on. So we're sitting there on day 3 in the morning, and I finally call you out, and I'm like, I have been trying to condition you to start a second podcast for months. And every time I say it, you have this physical response. And I just want you to know that I will keep conditioning you to do a second podcast.
You're basically like, it's happening.
Just so you know. Yeah. Right? Okay. So I say that to say something happened on day 2 in the evening that I woke up in the morning and I'm like, we're starting a second podcast. Yeah. So, but we get to
day 3. We're sitting by the fireplace.
We're sitting by the fireplace. Yeah. So I guess let's go back to the end of day 2, because the end of day 2 was the influencers, right?
No, we had just watched the influencer one.
Right before.
So we went to the influencer one.
Yeah.
And honestly, at that point, I was kind of over it. And you were like, let's go to this last session of the day. The last session of the day. Yeah. And I even
go see some influencers.
I even called my husband, great. And like we got there a little early.
Oh, yeah.
And so like you could kind of see the people on the side, and like I try really hard not to judge people by the way they look, but like these 2 women, like fake blonde hair, fake boobs, fake lips, fake everything. And I'm like, This is what I've been dragged to. These chicks are not the vibe. Like,
and I was so into it. Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
And so, like, going into, and I even was on the phone with my husband. And I was like, well, we have this last session. I'm probably not going to get anything out of it because I'm looking at these women and I'm like, they are not my people. So we're just going to power through one more session.
Yeah.
and then I can go eat food because that's
like I'm hungry and I want to go and I'm tired. And yes, my brain was fried too, but I was so excited to see these.
But I'm so glad we went because we got so much out of that.
Where did it happen before that? That we had a conversation about, not about a second podcast, because that happened the morning of day 3. The conversation we had at the end of day 2 was, did we mess up?
Did we mess up? Yep. Because
we took Tablecast. We took Come to the Table, which was you and I talking, you and I telling our story, you and I chronologically going through our lives, like just going through our lives as they were happening.
Yeah.
And we were growing and we were doing good things. And then we started interviewing people. And I was like, did we change the format of our podcast? And maybe we shouldn't have. We should have started a second. That's what happened.
Yes.
We should have started a second podcast. And so we were kind of in that place at the end of day 2. And when I woke up in the morning, I was like, no, we have to start a second podcast.
Yeah.
That's right. So go ahead.
Yes.
We went to the influencer meeting.
So we went to the influencer one and they were talking. And one of the people, they were, I'm sure,
reality show stars.
Yeah. They're so like this husband-wife couple. She started doing a YouTube channel during COVID and like chronicling their life, but they're very Jersey Shore.
Oh yeah, totally.
So
loved it.
So they're very like in your face, loud, confrontational, right? And so they get all these views on YouTube. And so this lady said, people like, she phrased it like people like the drama. Of seeing your drama, and because it makes them feel better about like their own lives or whatever. And like that's not the part of what she said that I walked away with, but it was like the point she was trying to make by saying that was your story. People resonate with your story.
Yeah.
Her story was dramatic.
Yeah.
And so that was her target audience, is the dramatic side of it. Whereas I took it as the people who resonate with our story. And then we started realizing all of these people had asked us questions, wanted to hear our story, we had stood with the woman.
Yeah, we're trying to look at like there's booths and people are trying to like promote their products. Like I do this for podcasting and I do that. You can talk to like the people that do microphones, the people who do this. And we would walk up to a booth. And of course, their first question is they're like, oh, do you have a podcast? Because they want to know if you're an independent podcaster, are you a network, or are you like a producer behind the scenes? That's what they're asking for. And so we're like, well, we're podcasters. We have a podcast and this is what we're doing. And this is what we've talked about. And this is our journey. And then, this lady, like we spent 20, 30 minutes talking to this lady because she kept asking us questions.
We walked up to her and we're like, someone uses your product.
And they want us to come check it out.
They said, we have to come ask you about your product. Like
we opened the door. We were like the perfect people to sell to. You don't have to sell to us.
Yeah. We're like, we just want to know because apparently it's amazing. Like, please take our money. Tell us how. And 45 minutes later, she is so interested in our story and how we got to where we are.
Yeah.
And
you could see the questions she was asking were not new to her.
Yeah.
She had these questions rolling around.
Oh yeah.
In her mind for a long time. And you could just see that she was getting answers to things that she had questions for. And she wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
Every single person that we talked to, that we had these conversations with, these things have been rolling around for them.
Yeah.
And then we realized like we've gotten that same result by listening to other people's stories and other podcasts. And we journaled a lot of those through our deconstruction and reconstruction journey, in past seasons of like, I listened to this and it made me realize this, and this. But what I just learned, I just learned something that I didn't know before. There's actually a study on that. Like, you may not see what's going on in your life. Your brain has a defense mechanism. We have defense mechanisms. And this is why, and I knew we had these defense mechanisms because this is why children are able to be abused by their parents and still love their parents. Like these are their defense mechanism's gone haywire
Yeah.
because we come into situations of chaos. But we would not be here today if we didn't have these defense mechanisms. So there's a good reason to have them, but the species would have died out long ago. And so your brain will, and this happens a lot with trauma victims, and this answers the question why women stay in abusive marriages so long.
Yeah.
Because what happens is, and this is why you hear the consistent story of people who have to grieve. Like, one thing I was told about recovering from an abusive marriage was that I had to grieve the relationship that was pretend in my head, that was imaginary. Like that I actually had to work through a process of a fake relationship that I had created. But your brain does that. So your brain, when it cannot process these things, will push it back. And so you don't remember. And you just stay, and really you remember the good things. I don't have all the technical jargon because I just learned this and I haven't dived into it. But your brain does that. So when you hear somebody else's story and it has similarities to what you're going through, it actually opens you up to understand what it brings forth those things in a safe way that you can process it, because your brain is all about keeping you safe. And so another way to look at it is we all have this backpack. I heard this analogy from somebody. You have a backpack, and when you confront things in your life that you can't handle and your brain can't process, this happens with children a lot. And as you go through trauma at a young age, it puts it in your backpack. And then that also leads you to understand why you feel weighed down. So if you have more stuff in your backpack, but that's another podcast episode. So you put it in your backpack at the right time when your brain feels like you can process it in a safe way that isn't detrimental to you. It'll bring that information up. It wants you to deal with it. It's telling you now is time. What do? We just stuff it back down. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to think about that. Why am I thinking about that? And I just keep stuffing and stuffing and stuffing. So when you are reading a book about somebody else's story and it resonates with something you're going through, it gives you that opportunity to process through these things. And so we experience that without knowing we were experiencing about that. And so realizing that we listened to other people tell their stories in ways that are safe, that are honest, that are healthy. And it was very, very helpful for us. And so we really had a little bit of a crisis of did we mess up? Because we had just kept telling our story, because really you got a front seat to walking through it.
Oh yeah.
What, I know we did justice to it, but
I feel like you and I both got to a point where we're like, okay, we're healed. We're moving on, and
and the podcast grew with us.
Yeah. And so we kind of had this conflicting moment of we felt like we ruined the podcast.
Yeah. I said I've ruined it. It's done. I'm going home. I came to this conference and now I'm done.
But then also feeling like we also just kind of left that story. And
I did. I looked at you and I said, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm over it. Bleh. That's how I feel about the whole thing.
We lived it and we recorded it as we were living it. And so if you were with us for that, you really honestly got our rawness. We would meet, once a month, once every few weeks.
Yes, and whatever was going on.
Yeah, and we would just kind of word vomit all over everything.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of stuff that we held back.
A lot of stuff we alluded to.
There's
a lot of backstory too that
that we didn't feel was appropriate or right or safe to share at that time.
Yeah. Some of that's because we weren't healed yet, as we're walking. Yeah, you really are walking through the healing.
Oh journey. We needed to process through all that, but once we came out the other side of it, and now we're so far removed from that, we're kind of okay, great, wonderful.
That was fun. Let's go do our business and our media company and talk to people.
Yeah.
Life is great. But there's a moment we're sitting. Okay, so now we go back.
Yep.
Here we are at this moment. We're sitting in these two big brown comfy chairs in this beautiful hotel down in Denver, Colorado, right next to this fireplace. This is the only two chairs in the entire corridor of this. I mean, like, this is a huge conference, and these are like two chairs by a fireplace.
We're talking like thousands of
the
podcasters.
Scene. Yeah, I'm setting the scene.
Yes.
We're sitting there. We're tired. We're exhausted. We're hungry. We're barely making sense of our own words. I was like laying in the chair, like, I'm by a fireplace and I'm happy. And what came out of your mouth?
We have to start another podcast.
I was like,
I'm pretty sure I looked at you and I was like, you were right. We have to start another podcast.
You did.
But it's not the Asha Media podcast because Tablecast evolved as Asha Media became a thing. It was the podcast we had when we started Asha. It is the podcast that got us to the point of going to the conference that inspired us to start Asha.
You're like, we didn't make a mistake. Tablecast is the podcast.
We didn't ruin the podcast. We didn't ruin the podcast. We didn't break the podcast. But there is another one, and there is a story that we need to tell that we can tell in a safe way. We can tell in a respectful way.
In a healthy way.
In a healthy way. We're both healed. We both feel like we are at a place where we can talk about these things and have it not be triggering or detrimental to our own spiritual and mental health. And we can do it in a way that isn't tearing down a person or tearing down one particular entity, but bringing to light the darkness that is spiritual abuse and high control religion trauma.
Yeah.
And discuss, because we have listened to these things. We've listened to The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill. Good Lord, we started this whole journey watching a stupid documentary about the LuLaRoe Legging Company.
Right.
Like,
well, and now what, and like, honestly, like everybody we talked to, like we had a few places that we gained information.
Yeah.
Just in the in that week at that conference, I learned about so many more places where this whole multi-level marketing, like, I mean, people were telling me things. They're like, no, you have to read this. You need to go check out this. This is happening. Like, this is, and even the guy from Japan, who's like, no, I see these issues when I travel to churches. I see these certain things going on. He wasn't talking about spiritual abuse, and like, he wasn't talking about the same type of like high control environments, but he was talking about some of the traits and issues that are happening within our
the
institution of church in America, that he's like, what are we doing? And he was talking about like preaching versus pastoring. And that was the area that he was talking about. So I'd be specific. I'm not going to allude to anything here. I'm going to be like, no, specifically he was talking about something we said triggered this conversation of like, he's like, no, I have seen this coming back from another country back into the American church. What are we doing?
Well, because we were talking to talk about like,
oh my gosh, I love this guy. I'm
feeling so completely like out of your whole. Like, we're just two random women who randomly started a podcast, like, on accident. And we're sitting here, and so we're with the guy who has, from Japan, who has his podcast, which I'm gonna link all of these in these show notes. Yeah. Like, everyone...
You have to listen to these podcasts.
Yes,
they're all so good.
Yes, and we'll have to find a way to be able to tell you about each of their individual podcasts in a way that will do each of them justice, because they
absolutely. That'll be
all of them are so amazing. But so it was him, and it was the guy from Wyoming who has and
he does like he's like a teacher, historian, journalist, like just
totally my vibe.
Yeah, like this guy is, and he's like a huge podcast, and he's sitting there and he like takes a journalistic approach to things of like politics, religion, education, and the who, what, where, why, when, and how And then what are we doing? Do we need to do it better? And just a real, like, not from a personal vent standpoint. Like, he really gives you
the whole
educational value of it all.
Yeah.
And it's so good. Yeah.
So we were with them, but then we were also sitting with the big wig head people of the podcast division of Focus on the Family.
Yeah.
And so the Focus on the Family people, were coming at things from a direction of, like, the church is under attack, which I understand, like, how they feel that.
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
And so the conversation was kind of like, well, there's that, but, like, can we also maybe kind of look at, like, maybe the church isn't so much under attack as it's, like, destroying itself.
Right. So yeah, is the church under attack? Well, yes, of course the church is under attack. Like, that is like, it's always going to be, but, like, we always come back to, and the place where I felt in that whole conversation was, like, I had to come back to, let's define the church.
Yeah.
And yes, there is spiritual attack, but now let's talk about the institution of church, which
but
is something totally different.
Let's look at the institution of church within the parameters of the United States.
America.
Yeah. And so that's where, and the guy from Japan said, I feel like there's a lot of people in charge of churches that are called to be a preacher, but have no idea how to be a pastor of the flock that they've been given. Right. And, like, the whole table went silent. And, like, everyone just kind of, like, sat there for a second and was like, oh, that was deep.
Right. Yeah.
That was, but, like, those are the kind of conversations we were having over the course of this week. And I think being in an environment where we weren't surrounded just by Christians, because when you get in that environment where it's all that all the time and every session is all that all the time, it's easy to kind of get yourself hyped up about certain things and ignore other things. Yeah. And so I did appreciate the fact that we were in just, like, kind of more of a secular setting, because it allowed us to open our eyes to a whole lot more stuff. And for us to make the decision that, no, this is the time for us to share this story. This is the time for us to start a second podcast, that we go back to the very beginning. Yeah. You don't pick up on we just left our church and we're not sure what we believe anymore. We want to go all the way back to what even led us to that church in the first place. What led us to make the decisions we made? What led us to believe the things we believed, and really break that down. And
just to do it justice. I mean, like,
I
feel like we did. I feel like for where we were at and what we did it well.
Yeah,
like, we really did.
But it was really like, we're going to pick up in the middle of the story and we're going to give you bits and pieces of it, because there was a wide variety of reasons we didn't share everything.
Things,
and it wasn't appropriate at that time.
Right.
And so, it was like, we're going to pick up in the middle of, it'd be like you walk into a game at the beginning of the second quarter and you stay for the second quarter for the halftime show and for the third quarter. And then we're like, well, at the end,
and then you leave.
We win, just so you know. Okay? Moving on. Next game. And I feel like that's kind of where we left it.
Yeah.
And so to be able to go back and start at that beginning point.
Yeah, and tell our stories.
In
a way to look. And, if I was worried about it before, I'm not worried about it now. Because as we've been planning and preparing and we're ready to get this thing going, and we've been dissecting it and coming at it from we really have been able to come at it from a healthy, healed standpoint. And I even amazed and impressed. And I was like, yeah, like,
that didn't trigger me. We could talk about that.
I could talk about that all day long, or whatever, and not have any, there's nothing, it's good. God is good. And he's done such an amazing work. And I think the biggest thing that we landed on was, you hear about these stories and they're big news. And the reason why Christianity Today picked up Mars Hill is because Mars Hill was a big name.
Yeah.
And
there's a reason why Hillsong and
any of them,
all of these Jerry Falwell Jr. All of these things. It's because they're so big,
right? And it's very easy to be like, oh, well, that'll never happen to me, or that couldn't happen to me, or that doesn't happen,
or it's just a mega church, and that's what you get when you get so big.
Yes, but what happens when you don't go to a mega church, and what happens when you're just ordinary, everyday people going to a little small town church,
And what happens when you leave that church?
Yeah.
And you have
to see the people every day.
Yeah, and you have trauma, and you have all of these things, and you can't pull out of your neighborhood without seeing the place that was the cause of your pain for so many years.
Or getting coffee and running,
or so going to the grocery store and running into someone, and all of those things. And so really, honestly, we had to get ourselves to a place where we were healthy mentally and spiritually and emotionally.
Yeah, because the other option was to move.
It was to move away. Yeah. Or never leave your house.
You're either, what is that called? Agoraphobic. You're either Amazoning and door dashing everything. And we don't know what you look like anymore, or you have to move away.
Yeah, and so we had no choice but to be able to heal. And so we just really felt like this is a prominent enough issue across the board in America, church trauma, that there has to be people in a small town setting that feel the way that we have felt over the past few years. And so if we can share our story, and we can share it in a way that is not pointing fingers and not tearing people or a particular place down, but sharing our stories in a way that
brings awareness
and glorifies God in the process, and it helps God's people heal and be able to move forward with Him, then we feel like that's a story worth telling.
Yeah. And, honestly, you get one person in one place, it's very hard to change systematic issues.
Yeah.
If you're one person. But enough people get healed, and enough people find, the courage and the boldness and the truth of who Jesus is and what He calls us to as quote unquote Christians, then we can make a real difference. Because I'm just one person and up against a systemic issue of institution. You're not, you don't have as much sway, I guess, in that sense, and you end up leaving, and then we're going to talk about that. But yeah, that's difficult. So I'm excited to see, where God takes that. I was done and over it, and I'm dramatic. Okay. At the end of the day, I'm dramatic, and I say things like, I'm over it. I didn't want to talk about it, and I do that to make a scene, but I really was over it. Yeah. But I'm excited now, because as we've been diving in, and doing it in a way of okay, so what is worth talking about, what's not, and how do we do it the right way? I think I've experienced more healing than I didn't even know I needed, and then the confidence to say, oh my gosh, there really is healing, and there really is, and there really is this after story, and it's great, and it's wonderful. But that brings us to, what about Tablecast?
Yeah.
I'm excited because we're not going anywhere.
No.
Tablecast is not, but it has you made the announcement on Facebook.
Yeah.
Tablecast is now the official podcast of Asha Media. So all things that we have grown into, that we are, because Asha Media is us. It's what we've grown into. It's who we are. It's our business and our company. Mm-hmm. And it's taking off, and we're going places, and we're doing things, and the podcast is coming along for the ride. So phenomenal.
Yeah. And we're excited. Just the episode, the people that we have just lined up, we still have, more people to book to fill out the season, but the people we have lined up, it's been so good, and just such a wide variety
Can I tell a funny story?
Yes, please.
So we interviewed a lady from New Zealand, and her episode's coming up.
Yeah.
And in the pre-show, I was like...
So she's going to be next week's episode.
Okay, so she's next week's episode. So... in the pre-show, we're talking to her, and I'm like, I'm so excited. You're like the first person from another country that we've interviewed, and this is so exciting. Like, I'm, super dramatic, so I'm super excited about it. And then, like, a couple weeks after we interviewed her, the episode for Ruth airs.
Yeah,
and I
texted
Amanda, and I was like, Amanda... So I totally messed up because Canada's another country, and Ruth is from Canada. So this other the lady from Kylie's not the first person out of country that we...
Yes.
So I was like, there's not an ocean, though. So I meant to say continent. I meant to say continent. Somebody from another continent that we've interviewed. Yeah. I thought that was quite funny. Anyway.
Yeah. No, it was just like, we have so many... amazing people lined up, and I'm so excited because I feel like what we got out of Podcast Movement, that being able to sit down with other Christians, and how, what we talked to some people that, maybe our full-on theology didn't line up, and, their vibe didn't match our vibe. But at the end of the day, we all walked away and I was like, well, you love Jesus, I love Jesus.
Yeah.
And I loved that. And I gained stuff from those people. And I gained stuff from the people that was like, oh my gosh, you and I, we like, dude from Japan, you and your wife need to move here because we're going to be best friends. Yeah, right. Like,
right? Can you come be the pastor at my church?
It's like, it's stepbrothers. Like, did we just become best friends? Yup.
Yeah, we just became best friends.
And so, like, that's what I felt. And I feel like that is what we're moving forward with at Tablecast for the rest of the season, is we want to bring that to you. We want you to feel like you are sitting here with us and you are learning about someone's journey and what God has asked them to do. And some people, it's going to be something that seems huge to everyone, like, oh my gosh, you wrote a book, or you have a podcast, or you have whatever. But honestly, everyone's story is huge. And if God is doing something in your life, then that is a story worth telling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. 100%. And I know that as we go forward, this Tablecast podcast is so needed, and it's it's for that reason. Like, people you might not normally come in contact with.
Yeah.
And then being able to be exposed to something doesn't mean that you have to make it your truth, take it on, change anything you're doing. You could listen and walk on by and be like, that was interesting. But I would challenge myself and anybody else that let's slow down and take a minute and not be so quick to be like, oh, your church has blue hymnals, I can't listen to you.
Yep.
And discount people because of something stupid that, honestly, like, let's be real. The United States is 200 and something years old, right?
Yep.
So if your theology only goes back 200 years, is it really worth, come on. Like, there's some, any church in America can't be more than 200 years old. But it was 2,000 years ago that Jesus walked on this earth.
Yeah.
So let's put that into perspective.
Yeah.
And let's stop discounting people because of the building that they go to be filled with something spiritual, right? Or whatever. Look, for whatever
you
reason
sit in
you go
pews,
to church.
I sit in chairs.
Like, who cares?
You have a guitar, we have a
your hymnal's red, your hymnal's blue, it's like, can we move past all that?
Yeah.
And that is like my biggest conviction in all of this is I want to do that justice, and I have gained so much, and I want to share that with others. And, and Asha Media, we are all about a place and a space and a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that there is room for everyone in this world. If you're here and you're here, you're breathing, you're alive, God created you. He has a purpose and a plan for you. And to me, it seems completely ridiculous to throw my life away and live in complete despair, and for what, when I have these promises?
Yeah.
And I guess I should context that as a Christian.
Yeah.
I should not, like, as a Christian, like when I was 13 years old, the first realization that I had was what I am being told about Jesus and what I'm experiencing in the institution that I go to every Sunday to hear about Jesus. One feels like a funeral, and the other one means I should be clapping my hands, jumping and dancing.
Yeah.
Well, as a Christian and a follower of Jesus who has a relationship with Jesus, I want that reality that's on the page, that reality that I'm supposed to have, to actually be what I'm experiencing.
Yes.
Otherwise, what the heck is the point?
Yeah.
Why? Would Jesus really die on the cross so we could sit in funerals?
Exactly.
Or so that we can be spiritually abused by institutions or by high control environments, organizations, religions, families, whatever, like, so that we could be toxic, so that we can never get out of our muck and our mess to be, like, for freedom's sake. Like, come on now. Like, let's do this right. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. So Tablecast, we got great things coming up. So
yes, we do. Oh my goodness.
We will start running ads for the new podcast once we are farther along in production and we are getting ready for actual launch date. You as Tablecasters will get first glimpse of that. If you are members of our VIP group on Facebook, you will get first notification of when those episodes and what that podcast will look like will air. But if you check out the most recent issue of Asha Media Magazine, you
could get a little glimpsey.
You get a glimpse. We in the magazine. I'm not gonna.
No spoiler. We dropped a little.
There's no shame in my game. I want magazine downloads. It is free. It will cost you nothing. Go to ashamedia.com.
And you know what? Yeah, go ahead. Finish up.
ashamediaonline.com. And we have an ad that has the name of the podcast.
Since we're being shameless,
yep.
In this, please download the magazine. Like, honestly, like, I'm so proud of it. Like, this isn't even just like you won't benefit from it. There is value in the magazine, and you will benefit from it, and it is free. So go get it. And then here's my shameless plug. Like, please, honestly, like, give us some feedback.
Yeah.
Like, when we talk to people and they give us feedback, it has been so helpful to what we do. And so if you are loving what we do here, please let us know so that we keep doing the things you love.
Yeah.
And if there's stuff that you don't love, don't comment. No, I'm just kidding. Comment. Please tell me what I could do better. Like, honestly, I'm a big girl. I can handle it. So I would love to, honestly, if you listen to this and you're like, oh my gosh, if you would just stop doing this, saying this, whatever, I would love to consider your opinion and make my own decision on whether I'll stop doing it or not. But let us know. Like, honest feedback though. Like we are here, and I don't say this lightly, but like, we're here for you.
Yeah.
Like, we're here because you listen. Because you listen and because you support us, we can keep doing what we do.
Yep.
If we don't have the support and we don't have, the listeners, and we're not producing anything, for me, this is my art. If I'm not producing an art that is of value to you, then what am I doing it for?
Yeah.
I talk to myself enough. I don't need to listen to myself talk more. So please provide us some feedback, because if there's a direction or something, a topic, an issue that you're like, oh my goodness, would you please find people to talk about this? Yes.
Yep.
Yes, we will.
And we have avenues and ways to find those people.
Like, we're like, yes. And if you're like, oh my goodness, like, I have a story burning inside of me that I need to share, get in touch with us.
Yep.
Let us showcase your story.
Yep.
We'd love to talk to you.
Yep.
If you're listening and you're like, you're not representing us over here, this group of people, like, let's represent you. Let's sit down and have, as long as it's not going to be, some crazy screaming match, let's sit down and talk to you. I want to have a real conversation with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Feedback.
So thank you. All of that.
I know. I'm sorry I get long-winded.
Season 4
my hair fell out.
is
Oh no, it didn't. You can keep this in too. Go ahead. This would be the way. This is how this episode ends. Melissa reaches up, touches her hair, and realizes that there's a little clippy missing. And then I go, oh yeah, I didn't do my hair that way today. Don't watch me. I do strange things.
okay. Thank you for listening. If you've made it this far, God bless you. Catch you next time at the table.
There's always a seat for you at the table.
Today's episode of Tablecast is brought to you by Asha Media Magazine, the online digital magazine giving women a place and a space to share their authentic voices. Download your free copy of this quarterly magazine today for insight, encouragement, and all things in Christian communicating at ashamediaonline.com.